Welcome to Upfront. I'm Daphne Good, and this is the program where we introduce you to those in leadership positions on South Vancouver Island. Today, I'm really happy to welcome Grant McKenzie, Director of Communications for Our Place in Victoria. Hi, Grant.
Hi.
And just to give people a snapshot, because you have done a lot in your life. Grant was born in Glasgow. He came to Calgary with his family when he was 13 years old. And after working for many years in journalism for the Calgary Sun, the Calgary Herald, the Vancouver Sun, and Monday Magazine, where a lot of people locally would know his face, he was also in business as a graphic designer and then started at Our Place about 5 years ago. Ironically, it was just about closing at that time and had been through some rough times, the Our Place operation. So, Grant, you've said that certainly social justice is a natural for you. From the scrappy streets of Glasgow, I can certainly see a connection, and I know you saw a lot of rough street issues. Why do you think the Our Place role suits you now?
I think Our Place role almost becomes a culmination of everything I've done in my life and everything that I've seen in my life. You know, I think when you grow up as a redhead in Scotland, and at that time Scotland was very, very white, and so the redheads were the minority that could be picked on. And so right from the start, you're an underdog. And so you had to kind of fight and scrabble and stuff like that. And I think that ingrained in me this underdog feeling. And so even as I went from a journalist, which we specify a lot, we work a lot on the underdog story, and working up and seeing that it's very, very easy for people to fall through those cracks and for people to fall down and for people needing a second chance. And so Our Place became a real culmination of everything I'd gone through. I really love telling people's stories, and I love telling stories of transformation and of change and of seeing that underdog sort of rise back up.
In Glasgow, did you see a lot of violence and alcoholism and street problems?
Yeah, in the time when I was growing up, it really was. I mean, it was sort of the murder capital of Europe at that time, so there was a lot of layoffs, high unemployment, which meant high alcoholism, which led to a lot of violence. You know, I was quite fortunate. I grew up in a very stable home, so I didn't get to witness it personally, but I saw it around me for sure. I mean, walking to school was a challenge every single day. I had to run like crazy past the I was a Protestant, and I had to run crazy past the Catholic schools. They threw their sandwiches at me, and this was a daily routine. So you saw a lot of things that I don't think growing up in Canada you wouldn't have seen.
No. I want to talk about Our Place now, so well known as a place of hope and belonging. How are you doing with both those categories?
I think we do belonging extremely well. I mean, I think that we open our doors to everybody. We're extremely low barrier, you know, so we invite people in from every walk of life. We don't kick people out if they're high or drunk, as long as they're not having any violent episodes. And the hope there, that's where I think hope begins, you know, and it can start with a cup of coffee, start with a conversation. And we really want to do hope better. We really want to bring more hope. I think that's one thing that we're aiming towards and going towards, is bringing more hope to this community.
Our Place clients are well known as the family. They're all family members. Is the inside of Our Place, for those who have never seen it, is it much like that? Are there sisters and brothers, and is there a hierarchy, and does everybody help each other out?
It really is. It's quite incredible to see, actually, you know, and I think that when people come in and they do like the sponsor of breakfast, or even the volunteering at a nutrition bar, they see the people that gather there. They see how they need each other, how they work for each other, how generous they are to each other. And you also see the other side of families too, where they're angry at each other and they're fighting with each other. But that gathering, it's quite incredible. And the staff, that's one of the reasons why the outreach workers are able to reach them, is because they're not coming from a position of power or a position of authority. They're there saying, we want to help. You know, what can we do to make your day better, to make your hour better, you know, and then hopefully to make your life better.
So we still are facing those labels of people who judge perhaps a person by their package, by their outside appearance. How do you break through that? That's a really tough nut to crack. And I know you deal with it, and so do the outreach workers.
It is a tough nut to crack it. And I think because when a lot of times when people see someone on the street, their first reaction, even though they might outwardly be ashamed, the reaction is actually fear. Because a lot of times you'll see someone, you'll think, that could be me, that could be my father. But you don't it doesn't quite, comprehend in that way, but that's your first reaction. And it's really all comes from fear. So as we break down the stigma, as we tell people stories and say, yeah, this could be you, this could be your father, as people see that, then the stigma starts to break down. This isn't someone who chose to be homeless. This isn't someone who chose an addiction or a mental illness or a physical illness. This is someone who life hasn't turned left instead of right, and here's where they are. So I think that when we tell those stories and people come to understand those people, then their understanding grows dramatically.
So homelessness is still one of the larger problems, although we've seen a great improvement over the last 2 years with some of the supportive housing, transitional housing, and so on. I know you don't have all the answers, and probably nobody does, but on the Coalition to End Homelessness, of which Our Place is a partner, I guess we'd like to know what are the positive strides that have been taken, and do you see it's a real advantage, all these partners working together, places like the Burnside Gorge community, UVic, the United Way, Our Place, and others?
Yes, and I believe that Victoria is very unique in that way too. I mean, Victoria, all of the organizations that work dealing with the homeless population, we actually work very, very cooperatively together. We have meetings every week. And we meet and we talk. And Victoria is one of the only cities in Canada where we actually get together all the housing providers and say who's got empty space, who would be the best fit for that space. We don't compete against each other. Mm-hmm. We're wanting to house people. And the more housing that comes on the market, and there's more of that in the future, the more housing that we get on the market, I think there's a very good possibility that together we actually will be able to stop people not having homes. Once they're in those homes, there's a whole lot of supports that need to be done. There's a lot more work that needs to be done, but the first thing is getting everybody a home. And I really think that Victoria is a leader in working together to make that a possibility.
So that's excellent positive news about safe and affordable housing being provided. Then we have the underlying issues, and we'll be right back after a break to talk about mental health, addictions, and other underlying issues. I'm with Grant McKenzie of Our Place. We're talking about homelessness and all the services Our Place is offering to assist with that. The underlying issues, Grant, we talked about addiction, poverty, mental health issues, colossal issues. No easy fix for any of these, but support workers are so important. What would you say in those areas are some of the greatest breakthroughs that have happened in treating people with mental health and addictions over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think a big thing, like when we're looking at, especially with addiction issues, opening up the overdose prevention unit that we have in the courtyard of Our Place has been saving lives, and that's a huge part of it. It's we know it's a Band-Aid, but we always look at, a life saved today is a life that can be transformed tomorrow. But the biggest issues that I think that we really see, addiction, of course, is huge. It's just huge, but what I really see is the people who are struggling with mental health. Mm-hmm. We see it so often. We see people that we have in our housing that, really should be in a much more around-the-clock care. And what we're really doing now is we're really working much closer with the mental health units and working with the nurses and really trying to get people assessed much better. I think what's unfortunate is that a lot of times people, they go to the emergency department. There's not enough time. For the nurse's job and the doctor's job is to get them stable and get them out. But they need such long-term care, and I don't think they have the funding for that. So I think mental health is our big thing. I think it's our big challenge, and I think it's our biggest letdown. I think it's one of the areas that we, as a society, haven't quite reevaluated enough.
Would it be part of a therapeutic recovery
I think
model?
It's a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to get anywhere if you're still in your addiction. Mm-hmm. And you're never going to get anywhere positive in life unless we can deal with what led you there. I don't know anybody who lives on the street who hasn't been sexually or physically abused as a child. Every single person out there, their stories are heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. That they're covering that up with drugs. that's how they're trying to handle that. So in order to break away from those drugs, we need to break down where that happened, how can we help them get over that, and that's a huge problem.
Do we in our community even really understand the extent of the mental health issues? Sometimes I wonder. It comes out when we hear about the fentanyl crisis for sure, and unfortunately we're one of the major centers of fentanyl issues and opioid problems.
Yeah, but I think one of the first things that people will say is, "Oh, he's an addict. He chose that."
Yeah.
And then when you talk to that person and when you find out their story, and when you see some of the women on the street and they're sitting on the street corner and they're drinking their wine or whatever, I mean, you get to know their story. You will be in tears. It's incredible how strong these people are to get to this point. And it's that mental health issue is combined with the addiction, but we really have to get them the support that they need, and part of that is sobriety, part of it is recovery, and a lot of it is a lot of mental health support.
So sometimes in the community, as you know, people feel it's futile. What can I do? I feel powerless, etc. I hear that.
Yeah.
I'm sure you do as well. Volunteers are important, but do they make an impact? Do they have an impact at our place?
Volunteers make a gigantic impact. I think that every little thing you do, I think if you're saying hello to somebody who's on the street by looking them in the eye and saying hello, you're making a difference. You're making that person not feel like they're alone. And every volunteer that comes in, every pair of socks that we get donated, every toothbrush that we get donated, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
We can't, as individuals, we can't solve everything, but as a community we can. And as individuals, we do the best we can with what we have.
That's a great reminder. How do you grow empathy? Were you born empathetic? You're a very empathetic person.
I doubt I was born empathetic. Yeah, I think, and it all comes from how you're raised and the things you see around you. I think that as you see injustice around you, sometimes people choose in a self-protecting way that I'm going to ignore that and be tough, and there's other people that say, I can't do that. I have to reach out and help. And I think that the more knowledge you have, the more stories you hear, the more empathetic you become. I think if you talk to a dozen people at our place and heard their stories, you couldn't help but be empathetic.
And
it would change the way you look at them.
that old adage, knowledge is power, is really true. I have spoken to a lot of people who've participated in the sponsor breakfasts, and they have been remarkably changed.
Yeah.
So let's talk about sponsor breakfasts and how do people in the community participate, and what do they bring to our place in order to be an important part of changing the environment for those family members at our place.
Sponsor breakfast is one of my favorite programs, and it sounds so simple because it's basically a company pays $500, and instead of oatmeal and fruit, which we do every day at our place, instead it might be pancakes and sausage. So it's a special breakfast, it's a hot cooked breakfast, and it sounds very simple, but the big part of that is not the money that covers the cost of the breakfast. It's the people coming in and experiencing that gratitude and seeing these people who are so thankful that you took the time out of your day to come in and give us a special breakfast. And they'll hear some bad jokes and they'll hear some corny stories, but they'll hear a lot of thanks. And what I find really interesting is we'll have CEOs of banks and stuff like that coming in, and they're never been near our place. They're scared of entering into that environment because they're wondering how they will be judged walking in there. And they'll come in and it changes them. You see it in their face. It changes them because they get to experience that gratitude, and they go, oh, I've seen that guy on the corner and he just told me a really bad joke and he said thank you for the meal and he really was sincere about it.
That's where transformation begins, though.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. It really is.
We're going to take a short break. We're coming back and talking about one of Grant's major future dreams in a moment. This is Up Front, and I'm with Grant McKenzie of Our Place, who was brought in to enhance the reputation of Our Place about 5 years ago. And that's included an awful lot of communication, telling the story of Our Place, and helping us to see the family members for exactly who they are, to understand the human element so much better. And I hope you feel you've been successful, because I think we've heard more compelling stories since you've been on site, Grant.
Well, it's definitely the best part of my job. It's a real privilege for me to be able to interview these people and to tell their stories to the world. And to me, one of the biggest kicks I get is because every time I do a story for the newsletter or whatever that tells a story of someone at Our Place, I always make sure they read it first, because I'm telling their life story, and their life stories aren't easy. And so I'm trying to and boil down a life into 800, 1,000 words for them. But when I get it back from them, they're so excited. They've never had someone take that time before, tell that story before, and they read it and they want copies for their mother and they want copies for their brother, and that is very joyous.
Yeah.
And then I really hope that when I send it out to the public, that they get as much joy from it as the person whose story I wrote.
And really, this underlies this whole program today. It's about taking an interest in another human being.
Absolutely. Just that one-on-one. Spending some time one-on-one with someone makes them no longer an invisible homeless person shuffling down the street. It makes it, hey, there's Bob. I should say hi to Bob.
We know how important hospice is to a lot of people, and I know one of your dreams is to start a palliative care model for those with active addictions and mental health issues. That sounds quite groundbreaking. Well, it would be for this area, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and it's because it's something that we're now facing, and it's something that I don't think we ever really thought that it was something we had to think about in the homeless community. But people are living longer, and now we're getting people who are in active addiction and they can't go into palliative care because those are sober facilities, necessarily so because of medication, things like that. But you've got people who are aging out, they're been in their addiction for 40, 50 years. They don't want to change. They still want to live the rest of their life the way they have, but they don't have the resources around them. So places like Our Place aren't set up to take care of someone around the clock. We've got a couple in Our Place right now in our housing, and they're a couple, and he's in hospital right now in ICU, but he used to take after her. He used to look after her. And so now what do? We don't have around the clock care, and it's sort of this whole new arena that we hadn't really imagined, and now we're in a place that we have to look at it. And I believe that everybody deserves dignity in all regards of their life. And that's just really what it is giving respect and dignity to people regardless of their age or their situation.
Let's help people to understand it a bit better. We have some scenes from Our Place, and while we have a look at those, perhaps you can tell us about the family, the artwork that they create, the activities they're involved in. I visited a pop-up library, and it was really heartwarming to speak with a lot of the people who were homeless and just came to Our Place to read books. And many of them were avid readers and hadn't seen really great quality books for a long time. So can you paint us a picture? What's in the big building called Our Place for all those people who just kind of avoid it?
Yeah, the Our Place building is a bit like the TARDIS. It looks bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, because you come in and we have, because we start down at our basement level where we have our hygiene area, which is where we give everybody a shower. And so there's showers down there, there's clothing down there, there's a little games room, quiet area down there. The next level is our and also down there is our care center. And there we have volunteer barbers that come in, volunteer massage therapists, volunteer acupressure, all the sort of medical care. People come in. We have nurses that come in and do foot care. We have dental hygiene students come in and do teeth care. It's quite incredible. And then upstairs in our drop-in center, it's our main meeting area. That's where people can get a cup of coffee, cup of tea, something to eat at any time. And also where our spiritual care team is there and their volunteers to connect with people one-on-one, to listen to them. When people are on the street, there's a lot of grief. So you need a lot of people around there to talk about what grief means and how to handle grief properly. And we have a computer lab for everything about connecting with people, connecting with family, looking for work, all those kinds of things. The library, like you said, it's fantastic. The Greater Victoria Library comes in and they refresh it every week, and they do such a good job, and people just love that. And then from there, it continues. We have all sorts of drop-in programs, like we have choir, and we have art class, and we have a knitting program, which is amazing for breaking that social isolation that a lot of people get into. A lot of people, when you see people who are out in the bush or people who are in doorways, they're leaving that group because of social fear, social anxiety. And a little program like knitting, it's amazing how that can break down that barrier and let people have that connection. And they can participate as much or as little as they need to, and it can really be a big bonding experience for people. So lots of different programs, lots of different experiences for a large palette for people. So that if you need a cup of coffee to be left alone, you can do that. But if you're lonely and you want to connect with somebody on a different level, there's art class, there's choir, there's different things like that you can get involved in.
Sometimes I think, Grant, there's a perception that people move in and they stay there forever. Is there movement? Do you see forward movement and hope for the people that are either receiving some assistance for mental health addictions issues to move on to supportive housing and eventually independent housing? That would be...
We see quite a lot of movement. You know, and one of our big jobs is getting people into their own independent housing. Some of the stories that, and it's their story to tell, so I can't tell it myself, but you would be quite amazed at some of the success stories that have come out of our place from people who are at the lowest of the lows and who are now running their own companies, who are now back on their feet, people who were entrepreneurs who lost everything and are now building back up. But what's really amazing is that when they build back up, they build up as such a much stronger person, and they give back. And they give back to our place dramatically and to the people that work at our place. And there's a lot of those stories that we see every day that are incredible about how a hand up really can completely change a life.
So like as you said earlier, we're working on hope. We want to build up the hope aspect. How do you handle the pushback from community? It's still happening. I think you and others are making big inroads in communicating and educating our community, and we do have a very caring community. There is still pushback, though. You know, the NIMBY syndrome, whatever.
Yeah, there's always going to be pushback until it affects your life. You know, and unfortunately for most of us, it's going to affect our life, whether it's an illness, physical illness, or whether it's a mental health issue, or whether it's an addiction issue. Right now, with the fentanyl crisis, there are so many families that never thought addiction would touch their lives. And they're seeing it in their children, they're seeing it in their relatives. And that bite of reality, as sad as it is, that can open a lot of people's eyes. People who were so judgmental before, that happens to them, they're like, oh, now I get it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's sad. I mean, that's why we hope we get more empathy through stories than through real life experience, because some of the real life experience is so heartbreaking.
Well, thank you for telling those stories. And we've got some interesting ones to talk about after this break, because there's a thread that runs through literary issues and characters and Grant McKenzie and his work at Our Place. We'll be right back. Grant McKenzie, Director of Communications for Our Place, is my guest. And one thread that runs throughout Grant's life is writing, journalism, telling stories. He's a prolific writer of novels. He's written 10 books, some in the top 10 of Canadian mysteries. These are thrillers about ordinary people caught up in extraordinary circumstances. Your last two novels, The Fear in Her Eyes and The Butcher's Son, have starred Ian Quinn, a child protection officer based in Portland, Oregon. And under your MC Grant pen name, Grant, the protagonist of the trilogy is feisty investigative reporter Dixie Flynn. I was fascinated to see the reviews. Congratulations, because some of them are awesome. One from Tess Gerritsen, the New York Times bestselling author of The Silent Girl, says, Dixie Flynn may be the most kick-ass heroine ever created. Kudos to MC Grant for giving us the ultimate girl power thriller. Great reviews as well for Publishers Weekly and Suspense Magazine. So does life imitate art with your writing? And I see a lot of parallels here with the world of Our Place and the family.
Yeah, well, I guess my stories feature a lot of underdogs, you know, so they really are the they're people who are, a lot of them are quite broken. A lot of them are struggling to attain something, and they're feisty and they're fighting and they're, a lot of times they're going up against big odds and stuff, and and a lot of humor in it, and that parallels the family a lot too. There's a lot of humor out there amidst the pain.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and my novels deal with real world issues. You know, really some tough challenges out there that I have seen as a reporter and felt frustrated as a reporter, and so my characters can take it to that next step, and so yeah, there is a lot of parallels.
You had a great compliment recently when someone said they laughed out loud reading one of your novels.
Yeah, I mean, the Dixie Flynn novels have a lot of humor in them. At least you hope so. As a writer, you're writing it, and you're laughing yourself as you're writing it, and you really hope that translates. So when you hear a comment like that, it's really complimentary, because that's what you want. That's what you go for.
Yes.
And it means that people bought into that character. You know, they're not just reading the words; they're involved in that character, and they're enjoying what they're saying.
Very much so. So I'm looking forward to reading some of
Yeah,
these
that's fun.
books as well. You, I know, have spent a lot of time as a parent. You have a 25-year-old daughter, Kaylee, and you've been married to your wife, Karen, for 30 years. You one time said to me, we all need to take a different attitude, perhaps, or at least a softer understanding of people on the street. We can't be their parent. We need to be their friend. So leave us with some of your words about that, please.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is that, you know, when you're dealing with people, you can't try to control them. You know, you can try and show people, here's a better way to live, and here's how we can make it better for you to live that life. But we can't force them to do that, you know, and I don't think it's our right to force people to do that. But what we can do is show them a better way, and show them positive role models about how life can be different through this method, through this path, you know, and that a lot of that comes from recovery.
And those role models are there at our place
Absolutely.
through the staff, through the outreach workers, through many volunteers. And we have had messages throughout the program, so that we hope that you'll gain some more volunteers, and that we all gain better understanding from having you with us on the program. So thank you. It's been a true pleasure. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you for having me. Much
Thanks very
appreciated.
much. And be looking for Upfront again next month, when we concentrate on a leader in the Cowichan Valley. Bye-bye for now.